Welcome to r/relationships, where OP's girlfriend is demanding he buys cars for her kids. My girlfriend is demanding I buy cars for her kids after I bought one for my own daughter. My daughter is turning 16 and I agreed to help get her a car. She asked for a little Honda or a Toyota that's good on gas, so we set a budget of $3,000. If she wants something more expensive, I told her she'd need to chip in the difference. Simple, right? Well, things got complicated when my girlfriend's two kids got upset because I won't buy them the cars that they want. One of them asked for a BMW i8 and the other requested a brand new truck. I was pretty blunt with them and I said they needed to talk to their mom and dad about that. I'm not their parent and I'm certainly not responsible for buying them expensive cars. We've been together for 2.5 years and we're not married yet, so I didn't think this would be a huge issue. But apparently it is. My girlfriend's ex is upset because I'm not helping out his kids, and she's mad at me because I'm doing this for my daughter but not for hers. Her sister and her husband agree with them, saying I'm being a jerk for treating her kids differently. They think I should be more generous and help her kids out too. I really don't think I'm the jerk here. My daughter and I made an agreement on the car and it's within our budget. I don't see why I should buy my girlfriend's kids cars when I'm not even married to her and we're not even at that stage yet. Honestly, it feels like they're just expecting me to foot the bill for whatever they want because they think I have the money to do it. It's frustrating because I work hard for what I have and I don't want to be taken advantage of. So I'm asking Reddit, am I the jerk here? Should I reconsider and help her kids too? Or am I right to stand my ground? Not the jerk, but do you pay for everything for your girlfriend and her kids? It sounds like maybe that's the case. Why do they feel so entitled? And her ex as well? They're all waving red flags here. You might need to reconsider this whole relationship. While you're willing to help your own daughter out with a $3,000 car, I don't understand why anyone else would come with their hands out expecting money too. I certainly wouldn't be paying for cars for anyone else. You're not even married. He has a ring, and I found out that he's planning to propose on our anniversary, but I feel like I've mentally checked out. My partner bought the ring a while ago. He had insisted for the longest time that we needed to live together to see if we were truly compatible before he would propose, and he made it clear he wouldn't propose otherwise. I've been ready for a proposal for so much longer than he has, but I never held that against him. I understood where he was coming from, but after waiting and waiting, my feelings have changed. At first, I felt a lot of anxiety, then I had moments of hope and even excitement at the thought of finally getting engaged. But over time, those feelings turned into numbness. I didn't expect it to feel this way, but here we are. He didn't intend for me to know, but my sister let it slip. She helped him pick out the ring from the ones I had liked, and I guess she couldn't keep the secret anymore. She told me he's planning to propose in just under a week. I had no idea, but now it makes sense why he was trying to get me to take a couple of days off work for a little trip to the town where we met. I couldn't get leave approved though. It wasn't until my sister noticed that I'd been feeling low over the holidays and assumed it was because I was waiting for a proposal that I realized how much I had given up on the idea of it. The reality is, I gave up on it a month or two ago. I've tried to convince myself that I still want this, that I still want him, but the truth is, I just don't feel the same way anymore. It's strange to be in the process of falling out of love with someone slowly but surely. I still care about him, but it's just different now. We're both 29 and we've been together for about 3 years in total, so I know that might sound irrational, but he's been saying for 1.5 years that he'd propose soon, and here we are. And now, with everything lined up, I feel almost compelled to say yes. The ring, the plans, everything's ready to go. But when he talks about marriage and the wedding, especially the idea of getting married in autumn, I don't feel the same joy I once did when we talked about our future together. I should be happy, right? I should feel excitement about the life we're building, but instead, I just feel numb. It's hard to put into words, but it's almost like I've already emotionally checked out, even though we're still together. I'm afraid I'm making a huge mistake if I go through with this, but it also feels like I might be stuck in a situation where I can't back out. Update 3 days later. The thing is, from the very beginning, I made it clear that I didn't want to set up a home with a partner unless we were engaged. Early in our relationship, around 8 or 9 months in, he wanted me to move in with him, but I told him that I wouldn't do that unless we were engaged. He agreed at the time and said he understood. So why did he tell me last year that he was going to propose soon when he knew where I stood on this? It just doesn't add up. When I found out he was planning to propose and realized I didn't want to marry him anymore, I decided to end things. I told him on Saturday night that we couldn't be together anymore. He didn't take it well. He said I blindsided him and that he thought we both wanted a future together. At first, he didn't know what went wrong, and I had to explain everything. I pointed out that he knew I was uncomfortable with moving in before an engagement, and that I always ended up compromising whenever we had disagreements. He never did the same, and it felt like he just expected me to give in. I had told him about this issue before, and while he acknowledged it, nothing ever changed. Now that I'm ending things, he says he's willing to work on it and that it's not something we should break up over. While I agree that communication could improve and we could probably work through some of the resentment, I don't think I'll ever feel the same way about him. And the truth is, with him dragging his feet for over 18 months before proposing, I'm worried that he'll do the same with the other big life decisions, like having kids or even planning the wedding. The morning of our anniversary, which was also the day he was planning to propose, he woke up and said he couldn't believe what was happening. He said it didn't feel real because we should be getting engaged, but instead we were breaking up. He asked if we could try again, saying that living together had been really good for both of us and that we had been very compatible. He even suggested we take a break and then see if we could make things work. I just don't think that's a good idea, and I don't want to drag this out any longer. Since ending the relationship, things have been really tough, but deep down, I know it was the right decision because we just weren't compatible anymore. Some people in my previous post said I was just desperate to get married and didn't care who to, but that's not true. My ex from university, who I was with for years, was eager to marry me and brought it up soon after we started our first jobs. But there were a lot of issues in that relationship that we couldn't resolve, and after trying for over a year, I had to end it. If I was just after a ring, I would have married him and ignored the issues we had. I thought my current partner and I were a great match, but I guess I was wrong. I had been living in a flat with a friend and it was perfect for me, but I moved out to live with my ex, and now I need to find a new place. Luckily, I live in a city where housing isn't too hard to come by, but it's still a big change. My friend told me not to rush out since I've been paying half the rent at his place, but the reality is that place never really felt like home. I moved in with him begrudgingly, and now that we're breaking up, I can't stay there. My sister has been telling me to think about the fact that I'm turning 29 and that it might be harder to find someone to have kids with before my mid-30s. While that's something I've considered, I'd rather be single than in a relationship that isn't right for me. I know I might not meet someone else anytime soon, or maybe ever, but that's okay. There are other things I want to focus on, like studying for a post-grad diploma that I've been wanting to do for a while. I know he'll be okay in the end. He's resilient, and now both of us can move on with our lives. Am I the jerk for telling my ex's sterile affair partner to have her own daughter if she wants to share cheerleading with one? My ex, 44 male, cheated on me, 40 female, several years ago and ended our marriage so he could be with his affair partner, Jen, who's 42, who is now his wife. At the time, our kids were very young. The whole thing was messy and painful, and it still irritates me to think about how smug they were back then. My ex gets the kids 6 days a month now, which is about all he can handle since he works out of state most of the time. It's not ideal, but it's the only way to keep the kids with an actual parent instead of a babysitter or Jen. When they first got together, my ex and Jen went out of their way to tell me that she's sterile and can never have kids. I never asked, but I guess they thought it would soften me up and make me more willing to share the kids with her. They wanted me to encourage the kids to treat Jen as their second mom. I shut that down immediately. I told them flat out that we weren't even friends, and they shouldn't expect me to do them any favors. Jen was someone I sort of knew before everything blew up. She used to date someone in my ex's friend group and even made an effort to be friendly with me. Looking back, it's obvious she was trying to pave the way for when the truth came out. She probably thought if we were buddies, I wouldn't hate her as much. Spoiler, it didn't work. Fast forward to now, and Jen is still trying to insert herself into the kids' lives in ways that make me want to scream. She's apparently really into cheerleading. She was a big cheerleader in her youth, and now she volunteers with local cheer groups. That's all fine and dandy, but now she's decided that my 10-year-old needs to get involved in cheer. My daughter told me about it a couple of weeks ago. Apparently, Jen has been pushing her hard to join, and my ex is backing her up. My daughter doesn't want to and asked for my help. She knows that anything like this needs to be agreed on by both me and her dad, so she figured I could put a stop to it. I reached out to my ex and told him, in no uncertain terms, that our daughter will not be forced into cheerleading if she doesn't want to. I reminded him that this kind of decision has to be a joint one, and that our daughter has already made it clear she's not interested. He ignored the proper channels. We're supposed to communicate through an app, and started blowing up my phone with a string of angry messages full of nonsense. Fine, I documented everything on the app and moved on. Then Jen decided to take her turn. She called me a bunch of times, but I didn't answer. A few days later, I ran into her at the store. She made a beeline for me and started in about how I'm punishing her by depriving her of my kids. She actually had the nerve to say that she's been in their lives since they were little and has every right to bond with them. She talked about how cheerleading is her passion and how important it is for her to share that with a daughter. I told her point blank that she doesn't get to make my kids do things if they don't want to. I tried to walk away, but she followed me around the store, going on and on about how it was her dream to share cheer with a daughter. Finally, I stopped and told her that if she wants to share cheerleading with a daughter so badly, she should have one of her own and leave mine alone. That shut her up for about 2 seconds, but then my ex started texting me again. He accused me of being cruel and heartless for throwing Jin's infertility in her face. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was just tired of her acting like my kids exist to fulfill her personal dreams. So now I'm sitting here wondering if I crossed a line. Did I go too far? Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. In response to comments about how she's been in their lives since they were little, you could have said, "That just makes you and my ex worse people for cheating with a man who had kids at home. It isn't a free pass to motherhood of them." I overheard my boyfriend telling his friend that he could never picture himself getting married. Where do I go from here? My boyfriend, who's 33, and I have been together for about 3 years now. When we first started dating, he was super clear about wanting to get married. He even said he was dating to marry, and we had a lot of open conversations about building toward a future together. We've moved in together, supported each other through some tough stuff, and honestly, I thought we were on the same page about everything, especially marriage. But here's where things have started to feel off. 3 years have passed, and there's been no mention of engagement or any kind of commitment beyond what we already have. This is a huge deal for me because when we first met, he was all about the idea of marriage. He would say things like a little voice inside his head was telling him to marry me after just a few months of dating. It made me feel like he truly saw a future with me. But now, it feels like all that talk about marriage was just words, and I haven't seen any action that aligns with it. Then, things took a turn. A few weeks ago, I overheard him talking to one of his friends, and he said, "I could never see myself getting married." Honestly, hearing that hit me like a ton of bricks. I was so hurt, but I didn't want to make a scene. I kept my cool and didn't let on that I had overheard. Instead, I just asked him about it later, calmly, and tried to gauge what was really going on in his mind. I asked him what his honest thoughts were about marriage and if his perspective had changed over the years. He told me he's not sure if he even believes in marriage anymore, and that he couldn't decide if it's something he actually wants or if he just feels societal pressure to get married one day. At this point, I made it clear that marriage is still very important to me, and I want to be a wife someday. His response was kind of neutral. He didn't really have much to say after that. We ended the conversation without any big blow-up, but honestly, I think that was the moment everything clicked for me. I'm realizing that our values about marriage are clearly different, and that doesn't sit well with me anymore. What really got to me, though, is that I've been giving him all the benefits of being married without actually getting married. I've supported him financially through tough times, helped him out when he needed it, and genuinely thought I was helping my future husband. But now, I feel like I've been holding on to this vision of a future that might not exist, at least not with him, and I'm starting to wonder if I'm just waiting around for something that's never going to happen. I've done a lot for him over the years, and I don't regret supporting him, but it's starting to feel one-sided. I don't think it's fair to me anymore to keep giving without getting anything in return, especially when marriage is something I want so badly. The truth is, I've spent years with him, but at this point, I don't know if he'll ever come around. It's not about being bitter or angry at him, but rather realizing that I've invested so much into something that doesn't seem to be moving forward. I'm genuinely torn because on one hand, I love him. We've shared a lot together, but I can't ignore the fact that we want different things now. My future has to align with my goals, and I can't keep compromising on something so fundamental. I've been thinking that maybe it's time to let go and move on, even if it's hard. I'm definitely struggling with this decision, but I feel like it's the only way forward. I want to marry someone who sees a future with me the same way I do. I've given so much, and it's starting to feel like I'm the only one holding on to the dream. It's hard, but I think it's time for me to move on and find someone who shares my values and vision for the future. Update. To make a long story short, I left him. It wasn't just about the whole marriage thing, though that was definitely a huge factor. The real issue was that he kept making promises about the future, things like vacations, home renovations, plans to travel, and none of them ever came true. It felt like a constant cycle of empty words. When I finally confronted him more directly about marriage, he said he wasn't sure about marrying me. His main reasons were that our families hadn't met yet and that I wasn't willing to buy a house together before getting married. I didn't think that was an unreasonable boundary, especially considering we had talked about it early on, And I made it clear that I wasn't comfortable buying a house with him unless we were already married. He also denied ever saying he could never see himself getting married, but honestly, I know what I heard. The thing is, I was always clear about my priorities, and it just wasn't aligning with his. We also had other issues, some of which were just too much to ignore after a while. Over time, I started feeling less like a partner and more like a maid or a housekeeper. He was incredibly messy, like to the point where it was driving me crazy. I used to clean up after him, but after a while, it just felt like I was picking up after a grown adult who didn't care. He even said, when we were breaking up, that he was upset I wasn't willing to pick up after him anymore. Those were his words straight up. I don't think it was too much to ask that he take some responsibility, but apparently it was. I got tired of feeling like I was living with a toddler instead of an equal partner. It stung a lot. Honestly, I started to feel like I deserved way better than that. But it wasn't just the mess. I did the math, and over the 3 years we were together, I gave him nearly $18,000, most of which went towards his mortgage. Yeah, I'm not proud of it, but I did it because I thought we were building something together, and it was supposed to be a partnership. He offered to pay me back without me asking, which I appreciate, but honestly, I'm still not sure how or when that'll happen. Right now, I'm staying with my parents for the holidays, and I'm planning to move into my own place in January. It feels a little sad and weird, but at the same time, I also feel a sense of peace, like it's finally over and I can start fresh. I know it's going to take time, but I really believe my future husband is out there, and I'll find him when the time is right. I'm optimistic about what's next. Am I the jerk for refusing to sign my neighbor's use of yard waiver? Last Thursday, my neighbors knocked on my door and gave my wife a request that made me instantly suspicious. They're planning to build a pool in their backyard, but apparently they don't have enough space to get their equipment in. They wanted us to sign a use of yard waiver so they could use 4 feet of our yard to move their excavators and bobcats through. The waiver said they'd repair any damage to the grass afterward, but that's easy to promise when it's not your yard getting destroyed. What really got me was how they casually mentioned they were leaving for Florida and needed an answer in 48 hours. It felt like a sign it now or you're a bad neighbor kind of setup. Now, my yard isn't just grass. I've got an irrigation system and internet lines running directly under the area they want to use. So Friday, I decided to call the pool company myself to get the real story. The project manager was polite, but straight up said they need 10 to 12 feet of clearance, not just 10. He also suggested there was a good chance the ground would get completely torn up. At that point, I was picturing my yard looking like a construction site for weeks, and the idea of relying on someone else to fix it made me even more uneasy. It didn't help that this was all happening right before my wife's 30th birthday. The last thing I wanted to deal with was neighbor drama, but Saturday afternoon, the neighbor came knocking again. He asked if I'd decided yet. I tried to explain calmly that I wasn't comfortable with the current waiver. It was full of typos, wasn't notarized, and didn't specify exactly how repairs would be handled. I thought that was a pretty reasonable concern, but he clearly didn't. Instead of having a normal conversation, he got visibly annoyed and stormed out, muttering about how much money he was going to lose if we didn't cooperate. Like, sorry, but your lack of planning isn't my emergency. By Monday, the pool company sent their project manager to our door. He asked what they could do to make us feel better about the whole thing. I told him flat out that I didn't want my yard destroyed, but if they could draft a proper waiver with clear terms, I might consider it. Then he brought up something that really annoyed me. He said there's an electrical easement that runs 1.5 feet into our yard right in the spot they want to use, and that they could just call for access if needed. That didn't sit right with me, so after he left, I grabbed my plat design and deed to double check. Turns out there's no easement in that area. None. They were bluffing, and it made me trust them even less. Now I'm sitting here wondering how far they're going to push this. I've talked to friends and colleagues, and the consensus is the same. Don't do it unless they're offering some insane stipulations, and even then, it's not worth the risk. I just don't see myself chasing a pool contractor or my neighbors to fix my yard, irrigation system, or internet lines. They should have thought about logistics before planning a pool that doesn't fit in their backyard. Am I the jerk for not calling my wife's daughter to invite her to Christmas? I, 63 male, lost my wife, Beth, who was 60 at the time, 3 years ago. We'd been together for 30 years. When I met my wife, she was already a widow. Her first husband had passed in an accident. She had a daughter, Jane, who's 43 now, who was 6 at the time that her father passed. Jane was about 10 whenever I married Beth. When I came into Jane's life, I had no idea how to be a parent to her. I expressed my fears to Beth, and she said to just let her take the lead. I talked with Jane and I told her that I knew I could never replace her dad and I wasn't trying to. However, I would be willing to do all the dad stuff that her dad wasn't around to do if she wanted. I drove her to practice, attended every performance, stayed up late to help her study for math tests. I taught her how to drive and how to shoot. Shared my love of fantasy literature and Star Trek. Our relationship was always hot and cold though. While she seemed happy, I was never dad or stepdad or even Uncle Sam. I was always just Sam. Beth and I had a son, Tom, who's 32, and a daughter, Christy, who's 29. Jane has a reasonable relationship with our half-siblings considering their age difference. A year or so after Christy was born, Jane became sullen and despondent. After talking with Beth, I offered to adopt Jane. Jane did not take this well, and I never brought it up again. I was the main disciplinarian parent in our household, and while none of the kids were troublemakers, they all did things that got them grounded or their privileges with our cars taken away. I think Jane resented this as well. When Jane graduated high school, each student was able to purchase 2 tickets to the ceremony. Jane purchased 2 tickets, and I thought I would be attending. But the week of the ceremony, Beth told me that Jane wanted to use her second seat to memorialize her father. I was hurt, but I understood. She put a picture of him on the empty chair next to her mom. I think it also hurt Beth as well. Jane was an excellent student, and she got some good scholarships, and I paid the remainder of her cost to go to college. I did get to see that graduation. When Jane got married, Beth and I were not able to pay for the entirety of the wedding. We paid for about half. She had her father's younger brother walk her down the aisle. She would spend a week or 2 during the summer with her father's family. At the reception, my wife was again seated next to an empty chair to memorialize Jane's father. I was not given a seat with Beth at the family table, and honestly, I don't remember where I was supposed to be because I spent my time at the bar or standing behind Beth, who was having a very hard time. However, it was a lovely wedding, and once the dancing started and everyone was out of their seats, I stopped worrying about where I was supposed to be. When Jane had her first kid, Beth and I were overjoyed. However, I soon learned that while my wife was going to be Graham, I was not going to be Grandpa, but still just Sam. I'm Sam to both of her kids. This was again something that hurt, and when Tom had his first kid, he asked if I wanted to be Granddad or Sam to his kids, and I jumped at getting to be Grandpa. Jane ended up getting divorced about 4 years ago, shortly before Beth was diagnosed with cancer. She and her kids moved in with us, and we helped her with her lawyer until everything was finalized. During my wife's last year, Jane was with us all the time. It was a huge help to both Beth and I. After Beth passed, I was a wreck and mostly useless. It wasn't right, but Jane ended up doing most of the funeral preparation. I'm very grateful for the help she provided. When Jane's father had passed, her mother had helped with the funeral expenses and had purchased a double plot. When Jane prepared the funeral, she organized everything so that Beth would be buried next to Jane's father, her first husband. I was shocked and felt that this was done somewhat behind my back. My wife had never told me of this, and Jane assured me this was what Beth would have wanted. I talked with Tom and Christy, and they know that I intend to be cremated. Because of that, they thought that this was reasonable, and the plot was already paid for. At the memorial service, Jane was rightfully upset. She told many of the other mourners that she was now orphaned and that she and her 2 kids had no close family left. This upset Tom and Christy a lot, but I tried to explain that it was different for Jane. I talked with Jane during the memorial, and I told her that she does have a family that will welcome her if she wants it. She thanked me and was polite. I've not really talked with Jane since the memorial. The first year, I invited Jane to all of the family get-togethers just like before, even though Tom and Christy were angry with her. I left her voicemails asking how she was doing, how the kids were. However, the last couple of years I have stopped because I never get any responses. I still send her and her kids gifts for their birthdays and Christmas, I just don't actively reach out. One of the last voicemails I left, I told her all she needed to do was call and I would help her. With all that information, here's where I might be the jerk. My daughter Christy is getting married next year. She reached out to Jane in the past few months and has been working on reconciling with her. Additionally, Jane's ex lives in a different state and her kids will be gone for most of the holidays. Jane has told Christy about how alone she's feeling. Christy called me and asked me to invite Jane to my house for Christmas. Christy and her fiance will be there along with Tom and his family. I told Christy that Jane knows she is always invited. Christy says that Jane won't come if I don't call and ask her to. I told Christy that she could invite Jane or she could tell Jane to call me. Christy says I'm being the jerk for not calling Jane. I talked to my son, Tom, and he says he's tired of the rest of us having to beg Jane to be part of our family. I love Jane, she's my daughter, but after so much, I just feel like the only way this will work out is if she takes the first steps. So, am I the jerk for not calling my wife's daughter to invite her to Christmas? Jane, if you see this, just call. Edit. I'm astounded by all of these comments. I thought I would just get a few, but there are too many to answer them all. I do want to clear up some things though. I tried to be the best parent that I could be to Jane, with Beth's help. I never wanted her to feel like our family was not also her family, or that her family had been replaced. I never felt like an ATM machine. I paid less than half of Jane's schooling because of her scholarships. I did what we could for her wedding, and yes, I was upset about the seating and who got to walk her down the aisle. But Beth reminded me it was her day, not mine. I will be paying for a larger share of Christy's wedding than I did Jane's because my financial situation is different now. But Christy has asked for some things I think her mom would have fought with her over already, but that's a story for another post. I don't think I did anything that would make Jane resent me besides marrying her mom. However, Jane has, except for a few occasions, always been polite and friendly to me. Maybe I shouldn't have put the wedding stuff in the post at all, but she did have a not father-daughter dance with me at her wedding. When Beth passed, Jane told me that her mother was amazingly lucky to have found true love twice in one lifetime. When I offered to adopt Jane, it went very badly. Beth and I had set her down and made the offer. We thought that after the birth of Christy, she was feeling left out. It backfired horribly. Jane said she didn't want my stupid name. I tried to explain that she wouldn't need to change her name, but she started screaming at me that she didn't want my stupid name, family, or anything else. Both Beth and I told her that this response was completely unacceptable, but she kept saying nasty things that teenagers say to both me and Beth. I told her that her behavior was totally unacceptable, and since her mom had lots of class and manners, that this behavior must come from her stupid father's family. Beth told me that I wasn't helping, and I left while she talked with Jane. A couple of days later, Jane asked to talk with Beth and I privately. She said she wanted to move in with her uncle. I figured this was a hollow threat from a teenager since that uncle lived 2 states away, and her life and friends were all where we lived. I said something like, "Well, if that's how you feel, you and your mom work it out, and I will make it happen." I then left. Jane didn't move out. I did tell her that I was glad she chose to stay with us. Our relationship did get better, but never substantially improved after that point. So I'm not a saint. I'm human. I did my best. Update. So Christmas has come and gone. For those interested, here's the update. Most people said it was time for Jane to face the consequences of her actions. Did Jane deserve to spend Christmas alone? Perhaps, but I didn't want my girl to be alone or sad when I could do something about it. So I called and once again got sent a voicemail. I left a message saying that I didn't know what her plans were, but that she should know that she is always welcome at our house. I figured that would be it, and I could tell Christy that I tried. On Saturday, I got a call from Jane. She seemed very down. She told me the same things I had heard from Christy. Her kids would be out of state with her ex for Christmas and New Year's. She was feeling very alone. I told her she's always welcome to come celebrate with her brother and sister and myself. She said that sounded really good and she would like that. Jane, Christy, and her fiancé spent Christmas Eve with me. It was really nice. Jane was very sweet to everyone. People were so busy attacking Jane before, and my post maybe was not fair to her, but Jane can be an incredibly caring person. Jane seemed a little on edge at first, but as the evening went on, she became more at ease. We watched A Muppet Christmas Carol, just like when my kids were younger. After my phone call with Jane, I found Tom, Christy, and Jane's old stockings. There was not a lot of time, but I got some candy, a book, and a couple of gift cards for Jane, Christy, and John. On Christmas morning, all 3 were a bit surprised to find that they had stockings filled with goodies and called me a jerk for not telling them beforehand so they could make sure I had one too. I said I was not involved, and you can't call Santa a jerk, or you get nothing, just like me. Tom and his family came over on Christmas Day. Jane practically knows more about what's going on with Tom's kids than I do because she's very active on Facebook. Jane's gifts that she got for everyone were very thoughtful. Jane is great with kids, she's a teacher, and Tom's kids really enjoy their aunt, although they did ask where their cousins were, which made Jane a bit sad. Jane and Christy made our Christmas dinner, and seeing giggling like schoolgirls in the kitchen together reminded me of Christmas long ago when Christy was 7 or 8. Tom found me in my office. He said that Jane told him that I called her. He said that he was glad I did, that he was not sure he would have been willing or able to make the call. I told him I bet if it was his kid he would have. That's probably enough of my family Christmas. I know that the real update is the talk that I had with Jane. Tom and his family went home because his kids wanted to play with their new toys. Christy and John left to meet John's family for a late Christmas meal and get together. As Christy was leaving, she gave me a hug and told me, "Merry Christmas, Daddy." When I turned around and saw Jane, I could see dread on her face. After everyone had left, Jane asked to talk with me. We had a long conversation, and I'm going to hit the important parts. Jane said she was very thankful to be invited for Christmas. She told me that when she started dating after her divorce, because of her age, she met a lot of guys who had older kids like her own. Many didn't think trying to blend families with older kids was a good idea. I guess they figured the kids would be out of the house soon, and they had co-parenting relationships that worked for them. However, Jane has her kids pretty much all the time. A large factor in her divorce had been that her husband had a view that his job was more important than their kids' lives. She wanted to be with someone who would show her kids, especially her son, that a family is not just a thing that women care about. Apparently, as her longest relationship was spiraling, she had an argument with her boyfriend where she said something like, and remember, I'm paraphrasing a story she told me, "What's so hard about stepping up and being a good dad? My stepdad was able to do it, and he didn't have any kids of his own when he married my mom." To which said boyfriend said something like, "You mean the guy you treat like crap and your kids treat him badly too?" She says that after that fight or relationship or whatever, she kind of started thinking about our relationship, things I had done for her and that she had done as well. She told me she feels embarrassed and ashamed, that she didn't know how to even start to fix anything, and she thought Tom and Christy and I were mad at her. Jane asked me if we could have a relationship like I have with Christy and Tom. I told her that I cannot give her a replica of my relationship with Christy, that none of us can change the past. I told her that for me, nothing has changed from that afternoon at the park where I told her that I would be willing to do all the things her dad was not around to do. I will always be as much her dad as she wants. Jane was crying by this point, and I held her. She started crying harder and saying she was sorry. I told her that I know and that everything's okay. In the middle of this, something happened that I've waited a very long time to hear. The sobs of, "I'm sorry," became, "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Well, one apology and a good cry doesn't change a person. The next morning, I was mostly back to being Sam, but there were a few dads and even one daddy sprinkled in. We'll see. Some other things I'm guessing people will want to know. We did talk about her mom's funeral. She said that she didn't mean to do anything secretive. By using the plot that was paid for, they saved on some costs and were able to get an encasement as well. The encasement should make it possible to have my cremains interred with my wife. Also, I guess a down payment has been made towards a headstone for me that can be integrated with my wife's. Finally, her youngest was apparently upset that Tom's oldest called me Grandpa all the time at the funeral and thought that it meant I liked Tom's son more than him. That was years ago now, but she said she will be bringing it up, that Grandpa Sam situation with her kids. I said I would like that. In all of this, Jane never tried to say that it was her father's brother or any of the rest of her father's family who didn't like me or made her act like she did. There was no outside influence, just a scared girl who wishes she could have done things differently. I know many people said that she wouldn't really change. I know change is very hard. Maybe after the holidays, everything will just go back to being like it was. However, even if that's what happens, I at least got one Christmas day when Jane wanted me to be her dad. Also, Jane knows that I'm posting this and said it was okay. Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard. Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.